I never thought that my own daughter would evict me like an overdue bill. She stood in what used to be my kitchen, shoulders tight, jaw locked, eyes empty. It was one of those Thursdays when the rain didn't fall gently but slapped against the windows like it had something to prove. Her arms were crossed so tightly her knuckles looked bone white. "I need $17,000, she said, like she was asking for a stick of butter. "Mark needs to start fresh after, well, the third one didn't pan out." "The third what?" I asked, though I already knew. "Mark's third failure. His third dream wrapped in a bad idea and sealed with someone else's money. Mine, this time, or so they hoped." I was holding a mug of chamomile tea, the one with violets on the side, the glaze chipped from years of dishwater. The scent used to calm me. Now it just made my stomach tighten. I didn't sit down. I didn't argue. I just said, "No, baby. I can't. I'm living off my pension now." There was a pause, like a held breath. Then she laughed, short, bitter. "You're nothing but a leech without cash," she hissed. Her face twisted into something I hadn't seen before, or maybe hadn't wanted to see. She turned and yanked open the cabinet, the one I had lined with fresh shelf paper when they moved in. The door slammed back hard, and the sound of ceramic crashing filled the room. A dinner plate I gave her when she got married, hand-painted with bluebells, shattered on the floor like punctuation. "You're useless now. Get out." The tea mug burned in my hands. My fingers curled tighter around the handle, the way I used to grip the steering wheel on icy roads. I didn't say a word. Not a single one. Behind her, the fluorescent kitchen light flickered. There was a faint hum from the refrigerator, the same model we picked together from the Sears catalog when she bought this house. I had paid for half. I never told anyone that part. I glanced at the sunflower dish towel hanging near the stove, frayed at the edge, stained with raspberry jam, and still the brightest thing in the room. She'd given it to me for Mother's Day 5 years ago. "So you'll always have sunshine," she said then. I left it hanging. Some things are easier to leave than take. I smoothed the front of my blouse, a nervous habit from decades of trying to keep myself presentable. Then I stepped over the broken plate pieces and walked out. In the hallway mirror, I caught my reflection. Not just old, older. Not just tired, emptied out. My earrings didn't match. My lipstick had faded. I adjusted my collar and forced my chin up. Outside, the rain had paused. The sky was that heavy, metallic gray that sits on your chest. I could hear tires hissing on wet asphalt, distant dogs barking. The world went on. I didn't cry until I sat in Carol's car. Even then, I wiped my face with a tissue from my sleeve and said, "Well, that was something." She didn't ask questions, just drove. Her car smelled like lemon drops and dog hair, and somehow it felt like the safest place on earth. That night, I slept with my purse clutched to my chest, like it could hold what little was left of me. I left in silence, but the echo of that day followed me like a shadow I couldn't outrun. I packed without looking up. Every sound, every zip, every drawer closing, echoed louder than her final words. "You're useless now." I folded my things like I was preparing a body for burial, slow, careful, numb. The closet smelled like lavender sachets and old resentment. I only took what I could carry. The pink nightgown she bought me last Christmas? I left it. The crocheted blanket I'd made for her wedding, white and gold, every stitch whispered over in prayer. I laid it gently on the guest bed, smoothing it out one last time. I paused by the bookshelf. My books were still there, the ones she used to call Mom's little treasures. I ran my finger along the spine of To Kill a Mockingbird and then Pride and Prejudice. I wanted to take them, but I knew the truth. There wasn't room in the suitcase or in her life anymore. Her hallway mirror, the same one she had begged me to pick out from that boutique on Pine Street, showed a woman I barely recognized. My reflection blinked slowly, as if afraid of the next moment. I tucked a loose hair behind my ear and buttoned my cardigan all the way up, like armor. I took my purse, my suitcase, and the yellow dish towel with the sunflower. That one, I couldn't leave. It was the last soft thing in the house. The front door stuck a little, as it always did when it rained. I gave it a gentle tug, and when it opened, the wind slapped me in the face with the scent of wet concrete and pine needles. I paused on the porch. Mark's muddy boots were still there, tipped sideways like drunk soldiers. I didn't look back. Carol waited at the curb in her little silver Honda, engine humming low like a lullaby. I climbed in slowly, knees aching, heart heavier than my suitcase. She didn't say a word, just reached over and rested her hand on mine, her fingers soft and warm, smelling faintly of cinnamon lotion. We drove in silence for a while. Rain ticked against the windshield. My breath fogged the window, and I traced a tiny heart in the mist before wiping it away. At her house, she led me into the guest room, the one that always smelled like lavender and wood polish. The bedspread was floral, soft, worn in. She'd left a little note on the pillow, "You're safe here," in her neat, slanted handwriting. I sat on the edge of the bed, shoes still on, and let the silence wrap around me. Later that night, I stood in her kitchen under the soft light of a hanging lamp, stirring sugar into a cup of tea. Her clock ticked loud on the wall. I noticed my hand trembled slightly as I lifted the spoon, a tremor I'd never had before. Carol sat across from me at her round oak table, wearing her blue robe and old slippers. "You don't have to talk," she said gently. "Just be." So I was. Just me. No title, no obligation. No shouting. Just the quiet drip of rain and the warm weight of a cat curling against my foot. That night, I fell asleep holding the sunflower towel in my hands, as if it might remind me who I used to be. Even before the shouting, the roots of her betrayal had been quietly growing. When she was little, she used to wait for me by the window, her face pressed against the glass like a daisy trying to reach the sun. I'd come home from the night shift, bones aching, fingers numb from sorting mail or mopping school floors, and there she'd be, barefoot, in a nightgown 2 sizes too big, holding up a picture she'd drawn just for me. I worked 3 jobs for 15 years. One as a substitute teacher, one as a cashier, and one, the hardest, pretending I wasn't always exhausted. I'd sew her dresses from thrift store curtains, add little ribbons or lace so she wouldn't feel like the poor girl. I even embroidered her initials into the hems, tiny and neat. She never noticed, but it made me feel like I was doing something right. She used to sit at my feet while I graded papers and braid my hair. Her little fingers would tug gently, humming some nonsense tune. I never stopped her, even when my scalp ached. I'd say, "One day you'll be too busy for your old mama," and she'd scrunch her nose and say, "Never. I'll take care of you forever." She said it like a promise etched in stone. There's a photo I still keep tucked inside my wallet. She's about 8, gap-toothed, frosting on her cheek, holding a lopsided birthday cake we made together. I can still smell the vanilla extract and powdered sugar. That day, she made me a paper crown and called me Queen Mom all afternoon. I look at that picture now and wonder when it started to change. Was it the first boyfriend who said I was too involved? Or the first time she got a paycheck and didn't tell me what she bought with it? Or maybe the time she told me, with a laugh, that I should be grateful she lets me live with them. The slow shift happened like erosion. Not overnight, but grain by grain. A missed birthday. A forgotten Mother's Day card. A joke about my outdated clothes. I'd smooth my blouse hem and laugh it off, even when it stung. Once, she told her friend I was a bit much. I was standing in the hallway. I don't think she knew I heard. I didn't say anything, just went back to stirring the soup, slowly, pretending I hadn't just swallowed a stone. I started to shrink in that house. Not physically, but in all the ways that mattered. I stopped playing music when I cooked. I'd tiptoe in the mornings. I began asking permission to use the dryer. It's funny. You give someone your life, and they act like you're stealing theirs just by breathing near them. That night, in Carol's guest room, I took out that old photo and stared at it for a long time. The girl in it looked like someone who'd never hurt me. And maybe she didn't. Maybe the world did it first, and she just passed the damage along. Still, I tucked the photo back into my wallet, smoothed my cardigan, and whispered aloud, "You promised." No one answered, of course. But the silence was better than another lie. Carol's kitchen became the first place in years where I could exhale without apology. The first week under her roof, I moved like a ghost. I kept my suitcase tucked neatly in the corner, as if I might be asked to leave at any moment. I folded my clothes with military precision, smoothed my bedspread 3 times each morning, and made myself as small as possible. Carol, of course, wouldn't have it. She'd brewed a pot of chamomile tea before I even finished unpacking, and she sat me down at her round oak table like I was a guest of honor. The table was scratched and stained, 100 memories etched into wood. It smelled like lemon oil and cinnamon rolls. "Maybe this is your chance to find peace," she said gently, stirring honey into her cup. Her spoon made soft clinking sounds, and I found myself listening like it was music. I wanted to believe her. I started imagining a space of my own, a tiny apartment, nothing fancy. Just a place where I could stack my books by the window, water my plants in the morning light, and keep my kitchen towels however I damn well pleased. A place where silence wasn't punishment but peace. Carol gave me a little drawer in the hallway dresser. "For your treasures," she said. I placed inside it my mother's silver-handled hairbrush, a packet of old letters, and the sunflower towel, neatly folded. Each morning, I sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea and watched the way the sunlight slid across the floor. Her cat, Muffin, would curl up on my lap and purr like a hymn. I'd smooth the hem of my blouse without thinking, then pause, because there was no one here to judge how I looked. I began brushing my hair again at night, not because anyone would see me, but because it felt like a ritual worth reclaiming. The bristles caught in the tangles, and it hurt a little, but the good kind, the kind that reminded you you're still alive. Carol never pried. She offered stories of her garden, complaints about the squirrels, updates about her grandchildren. Nothing heavy, just small, daily things that made the air feel breathable again. One evening, she made potato soup, the kind with cream and dill, thick and warm like a blanket. As we ate, she looked at me and said, "You know, I think you've been holding your breath for years." And maybe I had. Because that night, when I lay in bed and pulled the floral quilt up to my chin, I felt something unfamiliar move through me, not joy, not yet, but something softer than sorrow. Something like beginning. Just when peace began to settle, a whisper cracked it wide open. It was a Thursday morning, the same day of the week she'd thrown me out, and I had just finished folding the laundry, my hands warm from the dryer. Carol and I were sitting at the kitchen table, sipping strong English breakfast tea with milk, because she said chamomile was for when life got loud. "Today," she said with a wink, "we don't whisper." Muffin, the cat, purred at my feet, tail flicking against my slipper. We were halfway through our second cups when Carol said it, casual, like a leaf drifting across a lake. "I meant to tell you. My neighbor Angie said something strange. She ran into your daughter at the pharmacy last week." I looked up slowly, spoon halfway to my mouth. "Oh?" Carol's eyes narrowed, kind but sharp. "She said your daughter mentioned she was doing her best to care for you. That you'd been demanding to live rent-free. That you'd threatened to sue her if she didn't let you stay." I didn't speak. I felt my heartbeat in my teeth. The tea turned bitter in my mouth. "She said what?" I asked, quieter than I intended. Carol frowned. It didn't sound right. "I told Angie that's not the woman I know. But still, thought you should hear it." I sat back, my fingers trembling. I rubbed them against the sunflower towel draped over my knee. My comfort object, ridiculous, maybe, but something to hold when the world turned sideways. I stared out the window. The garden was full of bees buzzing over lavender. I tried to focus on that instead of the hot coil forming in my chest. Why would she lie? Why twist the truth into something cruel? And yet, I wasn't surprised. I remembered how, weeks before she asked for that $17,000, she'd joked with a friend over speakerphone about how some old folks love to play the victim. I had laughed politely. I shouldn't have. Now it all clicked. The tension, the sudden shift in tone, the simmering hostility that had no clear starting point. She's rewriting the story, I whispered. Carol touched my hand. And people believe the version they hear first. I nodded slowly. Then I got up, walked to my room, and opened my journal. That little red notebook with the leather cover, I'd had it since my teaching days. I hadn't written in it for years. But that day, I picked up my pen and wrote the first line. This is what really happened. When truth gets twisted, sometimes the only thing left to do is find someone who still remembers who you were. I called my sister Helen that afternoon. She lives in Florida now, in a retirement community with more flamingo lawn ornaments than actual residents, but she's got good bones and a better memory. I hadn't planned to tell her everything. But when her familiar voice came through the line, raspy, firm, and still with that no-nonsense tone, the words just poured out. I told her about the $17,000. About the screaming, the cabinet slamming, about being accused of freeloading when I'd been the one packing my things in silence. About the rumor at the pharmacy. About how my daughter had rewritten the script with herself as the weary heroine and me as the villain with a pension. There was a long pause. I could hear the creak of Helen's rocker and the soft clink of her spoon stirring something in a cup. Then, finally, she said, "People will believe what's repeated the loudest, not what's true." I stared at the wall in Carol's guest room, at the framed embroidery that read "Grace lives here," and let the words settle. "You can't confront her yet," Helen continued. "She's not playing fair. You're going to need records. Everything you can get your hands on. Not for revenge, for protection." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I rubbed my temple with the corner of the sunflower towel, now permanently stationed on my nightstand. "She's clever," I said. "She doesn't raise her voice in public. Only when the doors are shut." Helen chuckled, dry as toast. "Sounds like our mother." We both fell quiet at that. Then she added, "Keep your receipts. And write it all down. Dates, words, names. One day, when this thing explodes, and it will, you'll need something solid to hold on to." That night, I sat at Carol's desk with my red leather journal, a cup of hot milk with nutmeg, and a pen that scratched faintly across the page like an old song. I wrote down everything I could remember from the last 2 years, the insults wrapped in jokes, the shrinking space I'd been given, the financial asks dressed up as opportunities. I didn't cry, not this time. Instead, I tucked the pen beside the journal, smoothed the hem of my nightgown, and whispered to the room, "She doesn't get to erase me." I didn't plan revenge. I planned clarity. There's something steadying about putting things in order, papers, thoughts, memories. Like building a raft after a shipwreck, plank by careful plank. That week, I started writing everything down, not just the shouting, but the silences too. I bought a 3-ring binder at the corner drugstore. Navy blue, with a little plastic window for a label. I slipped in a card that said simply, "Truth." Carol raised an eyebrow when she saw me hunched over the dining table, surrounded by papers, bank statements, and scribbled post-it notes. "Building a case?" she asked gently. "No," I replied, smoothing out a receipt from 6 months ago, just keeping my story straight. The binder filled slowly. Dates, conversations, little quotes I remembered, some sharp as knives, others dull and sour. I copied my bank records, printing extra sets at the library. I listed every time she'd borrowed money, and whether it had been returned. Most hadn't. It felt strange, documenting my own life like a file clerk. But it also felt grounding. I added sticky tabs, requests, threats, gifts, witnesses. Carol chuckled when she saw that last one. "Planning for trial?" "No," I said again, but softer this time. "Just tired of being edited." I kept the binder in the drawer beside my bed, under the sunflower towel. I began sleeping with my phone on silent but placed screen down, just in case. I turned off the fingerprint ID. Changed my passwords. Not out of paranoia, out of prudence. Old habits returned. I started ironing my clothes again, even though I wasn't going anywhere. There's something about crisp fabric that makes you feel more credible. At night, I brushed my hair in the mirror, that old silver-handled brush gliding through the strands, and looked myself in the eye. Not in judgment, in recognition. I see you, I'd whisper. I remember who you are. Carol gave me a key to her house that week, tucked in a tiny velvet pouch. Just in case, she said. I placed it on my nightstand, beside the journal and a small ceramic bird I'd found at a thrift store, yellow, with one chipped wing. It reminded me of me. The tension was still there. My daughter hadn't called, and I hadn't reached out. We were in that cold space between storms, where everything looks still but smells like ozone, that sharp metallic scent before the sky breaks open. I wasn't ready for confrontation. But I was getting ready. When the next blow came, I didn't flinch, I froze. It was a Saturday afternoon, the kind where the air is thick with summer dust and cicadas scream like old kettles. Carol was out tending her hydrangeas, and I was sorting laundry, whites on one side, colors on the other, a habit too ingrained to break. My phone buzzed on the windowsill. I recognized the number. My thumb hovered. I thought about ignoring it. But something made me answer. The voice on the other end was already mid-sob. Mom, oh God, Mom, the landlord sold the house. We didn't even get notice. No grace period, nothing. She was crying, or trying to. Her words came in ragged bursts. They're kicking us out. We have nowhere to go. I've got the kids, and Mark's scrambling to find a place. We need help. 5,000, just to get through the month. 5,000, not 17. A discount, I suppose. My hand trembled. I placed the phone down on the counter like it was a coiled snake. She kept talking, her voice tinny, desperate. Please, just this once. You always said family sticks together. I stared at the window. Outside, the sky was heavy with the promise of heat lightning. A single bee hovered near the glass, wings twitching like nerves. My fingers found the sunflower towel, folded neatly beside the bread box. I rubbed its worn corner between my thumb and forefinger, grounding myself. Then, for the first time in my life, I walked away from a phone call without saying a word. I sat at the kitchen table. Carol came in a few minutes later, wiping her hands on her gardening apron, and saw my face. She didn't ask what happened. Just poured us both lemonade and placed a cold glass in front of me. I watched the condensation slide down the sides. She needs 5,000, I said finally. Carol didn't blink. Do you have it? I nodded. She leaned forward. Do you want to give it to her? This time, I shook my head. There was a long silence. The clock ticked. Outside, a bird called once, then again. Then don't, she said. That night, I wrote another entry in my journal. Just one line. Silence is not the same as cruelty. Sometimes, it's self-defense. I slept better than I had in weeks. That night, I had dinner alone, and for once, it felt holy. It was just soup, carrot and ginger, reheated from a container Carol had labeled in tidy block letters. But I set the table anyway. One place. Cloth napkin. The good spoon. Not because anyone was watching, but because I was. I lit a candle, a small one, lavender-scented, its flame soft and flickering in the quiet. I'd found it at a second-hand shop earlier that week, hidden among chipped vases and dusty figurines. There was something gentle about it. Simple. The kitchen smelled like herbs and lemon oil. Carol was out at choir practice, and the house was mine for the evening. I moved slowly, deliberately. Each step a kind of reclaiming. I took my time with the soup. The warmth of it spread through me like a memory of something safe. The ginger bit at the edges of my tongue, sharp and cleansing. I dipped the corner of my bread into the bowl and watched the steam rise in little ghosts. I didn't feel sorry for myself. I didn't ache to be missed. I just was. The sunflower towel was folded beside my plate, not used but present, like a witness. Muffin circled under the table, brushing against my ankles before settling on the mat near the stove, tail curled like a question mark. I caught sight of myself in the window, just a shadow, really. A silhouette of an older woman eating alone. But there was something upright in my posture. Something steady. I wasn't hunched or hiding. I looked like someone who had chosen peace. Afterward, I rinsed the bowl, dried it with a soft cloth, and placed it back in the cabinet with care. I wiped the counters, turned off the light, let the darkness settle in. In my room, I brushed my hair slowly, each stroke pulling tension from my scalp. I put on my nightgown, the one with the tiny blue roses, and smoothed the front like I always did. Then I crawled under the quilt and let my hand rest on the sunflower towel beside me. I whispered, "Thank you," though I didn't know to whom. Perhaps to the silence. Perhaps to myself. That night, for the first time in a long time, I dreamed of nothing. Peace cracked the moment I saw what she was really doing. The morning after my quiet dinner, I walked to the corner bakery to get fresh rolls. The air smelled like cut grass and hot pavement, the kind of late summer day where everything feels slightly too bright. Mrs. Lindstrom, Carol's neighbor, who'd lived on the block longer than the pavement, was already there, sipping a latte far too large for her tiny hands. She waved me over. We exchanged pleasantries, the way older women do, the weather, the heat, someone's grandson starting college. I was halfway through my cinnamon bun when she tilted her head and said, "You must be feeling better." I blinked. "Better?" She nodded. "After everything. I saw your daughter yesterday. She looked like she was doing just fine, thank heavens." My heart slowed. "Where did you see her?" I asked, the words sticking to my tongue. "Oh, down at that little coffee shop near the park." She was laughing, darling. Hair done, nails fresh. Said she was planning a beach vacation next month. Finally taking time for herself, she said. Poor thing's been so burdened, caring for her elderly mother and all. The cinnamon bun turned to ash in my mouth. I smiled politely. Walked home slowly, my hands clenched around the paper bag of bread like it might hold me upright. Inside, I placed the rolls in the bread box, smoothed the hem of my blouse, and sat at the table. My breath came short, shallow. That familiar pressure behind the eyes returned, not tears, but fury. The quiet kind, the kind that hardens into resolve. Beach vacation, fresh nails, burdened. I went to my binder. Under witnesses, I wrote, Mrs. Lindstrom, saw daughter laughing, healthy, discussing vacation, same day as eviction plea. I flipped through the bank statements again. My daughter's spending hadn't slowed, weekly nail salon charges, takeout, streaming services. No sign of hardship, no sign of sacrifice. She hadn't needed $5,000 to survive. She'd wanted it to escape. That realization settled deep in my bones. Not like a dagger, no. More like a stone dropped into a well, quiet, final. I lit the lavender candle again. Let the wax melt down in silence. Then I wrote a single sentence in my journal. She doesn't lie because she's desperate. She lies because it works. And for the first time, I knew something was shifting. Not just in her, in me. That was the moment I stopped hoping she'd change. I sat by the open window, the afternoon breeze fluttering the sheer curtains like tired wings. Carol was out again, and the house was quiet except for the ticking of the old wall clock and the occasional hum of a car passing by. In front of me was the binder. My journal. A teacup now half empty. I'd stirred in a little too much honey, but I didn't mind the sweetness. It soothed the bitterness in my throat. The photo from my wallet lay beside the journal, the one of my daughter at 8 years old, missing a front tooth, smiling like the world belonged to us. I looked at that gap-toothed grin and thought, she never asked to be my redemption. I gave her that role. I had sacrificed, yes. But I had also expected. Expected her to remember every packed lunch, every sleepless night, every time I pretended I wasn't hungry so she could have a second helping. I thought those things meant something permanent. I thought love, when it's big enough, binds like steel. But that wasn't love, that was debt. I made myself into a living offering, and then I was surprised when she walked away like it had already been paid. She didn't want my help unless it benefited her. My kindness had become currency. My sacrifices, expected, invisible, taken as the cost of entry into her ever-narrowing life. She had stopped calling me Mama long before she called me a leech. That should have told me something. I smoothed the sunflower towel on my lap, felt the familiar frayed edge against my fingers, and for the first time, I didn't feel comforted. I felt free. That night, I made myself pasta, real pasta, not the instant kind. I grated the parmesan like I used to when guests came over. I lit 2 candles, just because. I poured a small glass of wine and sat down at the table with my plate, my binder, and a single sentence in my mind. My worth was never meant to be measured in what I gave away. I didn't speak it aloud. I didn't need to. Some truths don't need an audience. They just need to be acknowledged. I didn't plan revenge. I planned protection. The idea came to me while folding laundry. I was smoothing the sleeves of a linen blouse when I paused, hands midair, and thought, what happens to everything I've built if I die tomorrow? I don't have much, but I have enough. A modest pension, a small savings account, a life insurance policy I'd kept active all these years, because, somehow, I always thought I'd need to leave something behind for her. A final act of care, no matter how she treated me. But that morning, the thought hit me like a gust of cold wind. Why reward betrayal? So I called Mr. Dennison, the lawyer who helped me draft my will after my husband passed. His office still smelled like old books and lemon disinfectant, and the receptionist wore too much lilac perfume. Familiar things. I sat in the high-backed chair, my hands resting on the sunflower towel I'd folded neatly in my lap, a quiet anchor. I want to revise my documents, I said. He nodded slowly, clicked his pen. What kind of changes? I want to add a condition, I replied. She doesn't get a cent, not a penny, unless she can prove, in court, that she cared for me in my final years. That she fed me, drove me, sat beside me, that she was present, not just in name. He blinked. That's unusual. So is disowning your mother and lying about it in public. He adjusted his glasses and gave a slow, respectful nod. Understood. It took an hour. I read every line twice. I initialed each page with hands that didn't shake. We notarized the documents. I left with a manila envelope under my arm and something new in my spine, not bitterness, not anger. Resolve. That night, I placed the envelope in Carol's filing cabinet, between her mortgage papers and emergency contacts. She didn't ask questions, just watched me with those eyes that never judged, only waited. Do you feel better? She asked as she poured us chamomile tea, the scent soothing as always. I thought for a moment, then said, no. But I feel safe. Later, I wrote one line in my journal, underlined twice. Love should not require a will to enforce respect. The lavender candle burned low that night. I watched the wax melt into quiet puddles, the flame steady, like me. The secret didn't stay secret, but it didn't escape from me. I hadn't planned to see her again so soon. Certainly not like that, in public, surrounded by cousins and in-laws, all holding paper plates and pretending to be one big happy family. It was Carol's doing. She'd invited me to a family barbecue, not her idea of a social ambush, just her usual warm, trusting self. Just come. It's outdoors. There'll be music, and no one expects anything but appetite. I went. The backyard was strung with fairy lights, kids ran barefoot across the grass, and someone had brought a potato salad with way too much dill. I stood near the lemonade table, sunflower towel discreetly folded in my purse, a comfort I still couldn't give up. Then I saw her, my daughter. She was laughing, leaning against the deck railing with a plastic cup in her hand. Wearing new sunglasses, designer, by the look of them. Her hair was done up the way she used to when she was interviewing for jobs she already knew she'd get. She hadn't seen me yet. Carol noticed the tension in my jaw and gave my elbow a light squeeze. You don't have to stay long, she whispered. But I stayed. I watched her hold court with a few distant relatives, nodding solemnly as if she'd carried great burdens. And then, bless Carol, she did it. Not out of malice. Not even intentionally. She was standing near the picnic table, balancing a plate of deviled eggs, when she said, loud enough for half the gathering to hear, well, since she changed her will, I suppose she's got some peace of mind now. The fork slipped from my daughter's hand and clattered against her plate. The color drained from her face. She turned, fast, too fast, and met my eyes. For 1 second, the party noise seemed to dull, like someone turned the volume down on the world. And I saw it. Not sadness. Not hurt. Panic. She blinked, then plastered on a smile and made her way toward me, smooth as ever. "Oh, Mom. I didn't expect you here." "No," I said, voice calm. "You didn't." Someone behind us started a new song on the speakers, something old and upbeat. Kids squealed. Someone popped open a can of soda. But I wasn't hearing any of it. I was watching her scramble to catch a truth she thought she could control. And realizing she couldn't. She cornered me, but this time, I didn't shrink. It happened near the side gate, just beyond the laughter and grill smoke. I had stepped away for a moment, to breathe, or maybe to avoid the awkward stares that came after Carol's unintentional announcement. She followed me, fast and tense. "You can't do this to me," she hissed, barely moving her lips, glancing around to see who might be listening. I looked at her, really looked, not at my daughter, but at the woman she had become. Her foundation was a shade too light. Her earrings glinted like little lies. "You already did it to yourself," I said. Her mouth opened, then closed. She wasn't used to hearing me speak that way, not with steel in my voice. She stepped closer, voice sharp but quiet. "You have no idea how hard it's been. Mark's been struggling." "The kids, I know," I interrupted. "I know exactly how hard it's been. For me." She blinked. The wind caught a strand of her hair, and she tucked it behind her ear, just like she used to when she was 6 and guilty. "You think this makes you look strong?" she whispered. "Putting conditions in a will? Threatening me with lawyers? That's petty. That's cruel." I smoothed the hem of my blouse, that old reflex, and said, "No. It's protection. You've spent the last year telling people I'm a burden. You turned my sacrifice into a sob story that made you the saint." She flushed red, then pale. "I didn't mean, you did. And you meant it every time you asked for money with one hand and slammed the door with the other." I held her gaze. For once, she looked away first. Behind us, someone laughed too loudly. A child shrieked with joy. The world kept spinning. She tried again. "You think this is justice?" "No," I said, softer now. "Justice is beyond me. But dignity? That I can still claim." She stepped back, shook her head, eyes glistening, whether from anger or tears, I couldn't tell. "You'll regret this," she said. I folded the sunflower towel in my hands, crisp and careful. "I've regretted worse," I replied. Then I turned, walked back toward the garden, and left her standing in the shadow of her own story. She tried to bury me with words. I answered with silence and a single sentence she'll never forget. It happened in front of everyone. They'd brought out dessert, store-bought pies, some melting ice cream, the kind of half-hearted sweetness that never quite satisfies. I stood near the edge of the patio, chatting with Carol's cousin about tomatoes, of all things. The late sun spilled gold across the yard. Everything looked warm, safe. Then she did it. My daughter stepped into the center of the lawn, holding her plastic cup like a goblet. Her voice was louder than it needed to be. "She's cutting me out of her will," she said with a brittle laugh, as if the whole thing were a joke. "Can you believe that? After everything I've done?" Conversations stalled. Forks paused midair. She added a clause, she went on. "Unless I prove in court that I cared for her. That I, what, changed her diapers. Held her hand in the nursing home?" A few people laughed, awkward and low. Others looked at me, then back at her, uncertain. I didn't move. I didn't speak. She stepped closer, voice rising. "Do you all know what she's doing? She's punishing me, making me look like some money-hungry monster. She's dead to me, that woman." Silence. Even the children stopped moving. I took a slow breath, lifted my chin, and said, loud enough for every ear in that backyard, "Better to be dead than drained alive." Gasps. A dropped plate. Somewhere behind me, Carol whispered, "Oh my God." I didn't wait for her reaction. I didn't stay for pie. I turned, lifted my purse over my shoulder, and walked out the garden gate without another word. My shoes crunched on gravel. The breeze lifted my hair. The scent of cut grass clung to the air, sharp, green, clean. When I reached the sidewalk, I paused. I thought I might cry. But I didn't. Instead, I reached into my purse, pulled out the folded sunflower towel, and held it in both hands. Its frayed edges were soft with years, but it was still intact. Just like me. When the noise stopped, I realized how heavy silence can be, and how welcome. The phone didn't ring for days. No text. No message. Just a void where her voice used to live. And I didn't miss it. The first morning after the barbecue, I woke early and brewed coffee, real coffee, not the instant kind. The smell filled Carol's kitchen like a memory from a better decade. I sat at the table in my robe, my hands wrapped around the warm mug, and stared at the patch of light growing on the floor. It was quiet, not the fearful quiet I used to know, not the kind you tiptoe through, afraid to be seen. This was peace. I drank it in like a second cup. Carol came down in her slippers, eyebrows raised. "You sleep? All night," I said. "No dreams." She nodded, sat across from me, and passed the jam. That was it. No questions. Just soft clinks of spoons, butter knives on toast, two old women sharing the kind of silence that heals. Later that day, I took a walk through the neighborhood. The air smelled like dry leaves in early autumn, that warm decay that feels like closure. I saw the first mums blooming in someone's front garden, and I smiled. A week passed. Then another. Still no word. Helen called, of course. "So," she said with that dry smirk I could hear through the phone, "you finally dropped the bag of stones." "What bag?" "The one you've been dragging for decades." I laughed. "A real one. The kind that shakes loose whatever sorrow still lingers in your ribs." She sighed, then added, "You sound lighter." And I was. I didn't realize how much I'd been carrying until I set it down. No more walking on eggshells. No more defending myself in rooms where no one asked. No more twisting myself into smallness just to be allowed to stay. I started organizing my things. Making plans. I toured a senior apartment nearby, one with a little balcony and space for my books and plants. No strings. No shadows. That night, I opened my binder, the one labeled, Truth, and pulled out every tabbed section. I didn't throw it away. I just packed it in a box labeled, Just in Case. Then I lit my lavender candle and wrote one last line in my journal, "She doesn't have to love me. I just don't have to let her hurt me." And for the first time, that truth didn't sting. It settled, like peace. Some endings are quieter than you expect, like doors that close without a click. I still think of her sometimes. When I see a young woman tugging a child across a parking lot. When I smell coconut shampoo. When I pass a thrift store window and notice a curtain pattern I once turned into a school dance dress. And yes, it hurts. Not like it used to. Not sharp. Not breath-stealing. But like a tender bruise you forget about until something presses, just a little too hard. There are days I want to call. Just to hear her voice. To say, "I made soup." The good kind. But then I remember the last time I offered warmth and was handed frost in return. Some lessons take a lifetime. I didn't write her out of my heart. I simply stopped allowing her to write over my life. My apartment is small, but it's mine. A bookshelf filled with stories I get to keep. A teacup collection, mismatched but proud. A plant that refuses to die. And the sunflower towel, framed now, under glass. A reminder of something once soft and beautiful and temporary. Carol visits often. Helen sends postcards from Florida, always with a terrible pun and a lipstick kiss in the corner. And Muffin the cat decided I was hers, whether I agreed or not. Sometimes people ask if I'm lonely. I tell them no, because there's a kind of company in reclaiming your name. In setting boundaries like garden fences, not to shut the world out, but to grow something honest inside. And here's what I've learned, after all of it. Love without respect is just a slow form of dying. And sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for yourself is walk away, even from your own blood.